Hi, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Getting to the Point. I am your host, Cindy Skalicki of On Point Communications, and today I have Steve Krausse. Hi, Steve. How are you today?
Hi, Cindy. I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I just want to quickly chat with you and let our audience know kind of how we met. We connected through our local 1 Million Cups came on and started talking about a topic very familiar to me and near and dear to my heart, which was Zoom meetings, right? And kind of how to hit it out of the park when running those. Can you talk to us real quickly, Steve, about the business that you run and a couple I know you have already run, and just give us a little context about what your expertise is in.
Absolutely. So currently I run two businesses. My favorite one is Beyond 50%, which is a small business consulting firm. We have this crazy idea that small business success should be the rule, not the exception. I also run a high-tech company called Directed Energy. We make high voltage pulse power equipment. And over the years, I've been through a number of other startups and small businesses.
Wow, that's awesome. So you're in the energy space in terms of that second business that you talked about. And I think if memory serves, you went through the CSU School of Business. Is that right? Up here right in Fort Collins?
That's correct.
Awesome. Awesome. Are you a native of Fort Collins from childhood, or did you come here from another area?
Not quite a native. I grew up in New Mexico and moved here in my senior year in high school in 1985.
Okay, awesome. Well, I brought you in, Steve, because I know how much experience you have with small businesses, and that's a large part of our audience, and you've been doing this for a long time. And you and I talked offline in March or April about some of the real key pieces you feel need to be present for small business owners as they're launching, going, and growing. So I wanted to chat with you about those kind of 3 points that you think our audience could walk away with. So why don't you get us into point number 1 and tell us, some bits and pieces about the financial piece that you had mentioned to me, and maybe share with us a little more about how you came to these 3 points, if you will.
Absolutely. So yeah, actually, when we started talking, I thought, what are 3 things, because you can dive really deep into one thing, or, are there 3 things that we, as small business owners, we can really be thinking about during difficult times? And the first one that came up for me, and probably to a lot of people, is cash, right? That's why we have all of these government assistance programs going out. And most small businesses have between 2 to 3 months of cash. That's about average, which means that if we have a 5-month pandemic, we have a lot of businesses with a lot of problems. And so what I wanted to convey to people and remind people is that, like we were talking about before, is until you put your check in the mail, you have control of your cash. And that's the important thing, is to remember that you, as the business owner, have control of your cash. And so we budget, and we have to, at this point, we have to start prioritizing. And that can put us in the position of having some very difficult phone calls with vendors. The people we don't want to have difficult phone calls with or conversations with, obviously, is our employees. But it's really critical that we understand and keep track of A, how money comes into our business, B, how we store it and manage it, and C, how it goes out and who has the authority to disperse it. That's the first thing that I think is really important.
I think that's critical. I was, I have kids that are in and my husband this morning actually was teaching them a little bit of financial 101 about how to get started with savings. And he just did a rundown of that. But it reminds me of the Rich Dad Poor Dad book that my husband and I read right after we first got married, about paying yourself first, right? And making sure that you're doing everything that you can to keep in control of that money. And so when you get a bill from a vendor and you don't have that cash on hand, or you need it for something that's maybe more important in terms of, order of payment, you're right. You have to make some decisions. Sometimes they're hard ones, but in the end, you need to maintain control and try to have that forward-looking, visionary outlook on what that's going to mean for you later on. So you're speaking to so many people out there right now who are struggling with this and trying to figure out where those dollars need to go first. And I think that, that's a key piece. When we're in a time of disruption, which we are certainly in right now, we need to remember those lessons. Do you have any memories of how you learned that the hard way, or how that really kind of played in, and when that kind of light bulb went off for you?
Given that this is a 30-minute show, we're going to have to probably dig into specifics, I guess. But yeah, it really comes down to, I've been in small business my entire career, with the exception of a six-year stint in the service. So I started my first business in my garage, recording garage bands in the 80s. And but where it really came clear to me was when my dad and I started a company called Remote Sites, and we were going to build remote power supplies for astronomers, because it's really hard to do astronomy in town because there's too much light pollution. But if you go far away, a good telescope will have guide motors and cameras and all this other stuff that takes power. And so we built basically a car battery, a box that had a car battery in it, and then a bunch of DC power supplies and some or DC automobile connectors. Used to be cigarette lighters, right? And we burned a ton of cash putting that business together, and it never took off. Which ironically, about a half a year ago, I saw a really nice version of the same thing for people who want to do outdoor stuff. We might have been a little ahead of our time.
Really? Yeah.
But that's okay. But the real point is, this was a time when we spent, this was early in the 90s when a website wasn't something you could do on Squarespace, right? Where it had to be coded. And we spent an inordinate amount of money on having a website done that I never liked. And so there were a lot of lessons there, but we ran out of the cash that we had allocated to that business. Now, we were both working at the time in directed energy, actually. But throughout my career, there have been points where you have these bottlenecks where you just don't have the cash to do what you want to do. And so it's really taught me to say, when does that cash go out? And how do I make that call? One thing I want to touch on real quick is that if you're having a cash problem and you're in really good company, I also want to reiterate, if you're having cash trouble right now and you're a small business, you are in really, really good company, because a lot of us are.
Right.
Okay. But it is also important to get on the phone with the people that you owe money to and be honest and upfront about it. You don't have to give details about your financial life, but I think it's a good practice to get on the phone with these people and say, hey, we're running a little behind. Here's what the basic situation looks like. Here's my plan to pay you. And be the person with a proactive plan. That doesn't mean the plan doesn't change or whatever. And we're not trying to dissemble. What I'm trying to say is just go forward with a plan to pay those people. Because I have customers on the directed energy side that owe me money. And if they don't pay me, I can't pay vendors. And we're all kicking the can down the road. But if we do it together with compassion, we can do it in a way that hopefully gets us through this crisis with as few business closures as possible.
Yeah, I think that honesty and transparency piece and the proactive nature, like you said, it avoids needing to sick, collection agencies on your clients. If you know that they're late and they have a plan, even if it's not ideal, it's a plan, and you can execute that one step at a time. So great advice, be proactive, and know that you're in the company of many others who are sort of, in the trenches with some of this, cash flow crisis. So, okay, Steve, Point number 2, what are we talking about when it comes to adding value during a time when you can't be face to face. You know, we are having a hard time, at least right now in crisis, unable to connect in the same way that we normally can. So you and I had talked about how important it is to be able to still add that value and share your expertise in perhaps a new way. So do you want to kind of crack that open for us for point two?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, I think you and I talked about earlier, in my career, I've never gone more than 8 years without a significant economic disruption.
Right.
And so the you kind of have this, you can imagine the worst time to start a business is about 5 years between disruptions, because you know that you're going to be in your startup phase for a couple of years and then you're going to be right into a disruptive element,
I think
right?
that's what I did. Hold on a second.
Yeah, and actually, the 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 issue really is understanding what value you present to customers, and um, the and what value they're really paying for. One of the examples that people look at is the marketing at Starbucks, right? As this great thing. They brought this international coffee shop motif to the United States, which we're now exporting, which is incredibly ironic to me. But but the the real genius and the value that created the Starbucks brand is actually removing the commoditization from coffee, right? Because coffee itself is a commodity, which means it's traded on price.
Mhm.
And so their marketing and their message and all of that is combined to take the commoditization out of their product.
Mhm.
And that's the real genius. So, but looking at our own products, there's a couple of, first of all, you have to understand what is your real value, right? As a small business, what do you really, really deliver to your customers? And is it, in the case of actually going to a coffee shop, is it the ambiance?
Yep.
Is it
Right.
really the taste of the coffee? I mean, more power to you. For me, I drink whatever is black and hot in my cup. So it does not matter to me.
Right.
The but do you understand the real value and getting to that, and then saying, okay, I know my real value. And like we were talking about earlier, if I'm a sandwich shop and I deliver organics, or I generally would have organic sandwiches in my store, and now I've got this situation where I cannot operate the way that I used to. In this case, we have COVID, so people can't come in. But it could be any number of other difficult situations. Um, and and so you have to go in and say, all right, is my core value filling someone's stomach? Or do I have really great organic recipes for sandwiches?
Mhm.
And is there some way I can leverage that?
Right.
Can I sell them online? And in this case, if you're really good at making organic sandwiches, maybe you don't sell your menu items online because you
Mhm.
want to reserve those for your store. But
Right.
maybe you create some interesting, compelling sandwich ideas that you can sell for $4 or $12 or whatever, whatever makes sense as a supplemental income. It's not necessarily about selling online. What the point is, that's just low-hanging fruit for the conversation, but it's really about digging into what is the value that you bring,
Mhm.
and how do you deliver that value, or the nearest possible value, in a way that your customers can accept in the given economy.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting because, I'm reflecting on some of the changes I've seen in my own business. Obviously public speaking is not happening right now in the same way. I mean, there's virtual presentations and such, but, my buckets are public speaking, and then there's another bucket of brand consulting. And I've seen an interesting uptick in brand programs that I have been giving to clients lately. And what are we doing during that brand program? We're talking about and identifying core values, core focus, and mission and vision statements to kind of start things off. And I think that could be related to what you're saying. People need to either, plant these ideas in and really dig in and find out what their core values are and write them down so you have a new platform from which you can launch really amazing messaging. But just yesterday I was doing one and we were, what are your 3 uniques? What makes you better than anyone else out there? What makes you different? What are you bringing to the table? And so I think you're spot on with, remembering to do that in a time like this. And I also love that you mentioned kind of like a beta test from this, fictitious sandwich shop we're talking about. But hey, if you're not going to give your full menu item selection right now, try some new stuff and try some new spaghetti and throw it at the wall, because there might be some growth from this time period where we can test some things and see what sticks. So
absolutely. And beyond a specific economic event, it's also a good pattern to get into to always look at the value that you add and different ways to deliver it, so that your business, it has a broader support base of a broader number of revenue streams, right?
Yep, exactly. Well, so far we've talked about making sure to keep a handle on your cash and understanding that you have the power and the control to hang on to that cash if you need to for as long as possible, and staying communicative. And then we're talking now about value and how important it is to chisel out that value during times of disruption. What kind of mindset shifts are required for kind of point 3 here, Steve, when we're looking at kind of that bigger picture and the personal components we need to tap into for mindset shifting?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that we get as small business owners, we don't have any time. So we have this, but when we're in crisis, there's this desperation that starts to feed, at least inside of me, of where am I going to spend that time, and what am I going to do, and how am I going to achieve whatever results? If your revenue's cut in half and you can't make rent, that causes a certain amount of stress, right?
Right.
And so I think one of the things we have to do, I'm going to sneak a side one in here, is really do find ways to take care of yourself so that you can reduce that.
Yes.
But beyond that, when we start to look outward at new ways of doing things, which we should always be doing, but there's a balance there. And in terms of, I'm a nerd, I love to try everything out, which is not always business friendly, right? Because you're always, they used to call my old boss the helicopter, because he would come in and like a helicopter and stir things up and then leave. But
not good. That's not good.
And I can see that trait in myself sometimes in terms of trying new things and whatever. But as we look at the environment that we're in, and we feel the need to start looking at new ways of doing business, new ways of adding value, maybe even new ways of controlling our cash, there's but certainly new ways of customer acquisition or connection, right? There's a lot of technologies and stuff that are out there. Zoom, for example, and we talk about Zoom fatigue because we're doing this new and different thing over and over again. One of the things I like to tell people is just to take a step back from how other people are using everything and say, how does this thing fit in my business? How can I use this technology, whether it's video conferencing or a new accounting system or a new marketing program? How can I use this and leverage it to do what I already do better, so that the tool is working for me instead of me working for the tool?
Okay.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I think, because first of all, as soon as you start working for the tool, it becomes your boss. And let's face it, small business owners don't like to have a boss. We're not good at working for other people.
That's right.
And so we want to be, but we also sometimes don't feel like we don't think it, I don't want to say we don't think it through, but let's use that. We don't think it through enough to say, how can I have control of this tool? How
Yeah.
can I use it to do what I need instead of doing what I think it needs, right?
Well, I think that's and I think in this particular instance, you know, so many of us were in fact thrown into, if we weren't familiar with Zoom prior to this particular downturn, we did have to, you know, hurry up and learn, right? But then I think what you're saying now is, okay, we've had some practice, we get the kinks, we understand where we're not. Now let me take a conscious pause. Let's go into the fall of 2020, knowing that I know how to do this. I've gained confidence. Now, how can I use it to my advantage? And I think that, you know, like any other mindset shift, it requires that like a purposeful sort of stopping point or pausing to say, hang on a sec, you know, let's just hold on. I've been doing this Zoom stuff. What parts of my business could this help me amplify? Where can I, like you said in point 2, demonstrate more of my value by using this particular tool so that it's not the boss of me, but I'm driving it to help me acquire more sales, more customers, bigger network, or whatever it might be. So
yeah, absolutely.
Like a good point.
And and I think that there's it's important to remember that it's iterative, right?
Yes.
You don't have to have it absolutely right the first time. Every time I record a video, and I would imagine it's the same with you, every time I do a video or a podcast, there's something that I go, oh, I used to go, oh, that was a bummer. That didn't work like I hoped. Now I go, that's an opportunity that I can change next time, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The first videos I did, I had my wall as my background. Obviously, I have this background now that I use,
Yeah.
and it's an iteration. How do you?
Sure.
And this is you know, I bought all this stuff on Amazon and glued it on foam board. This is not fancy stuff, right?
Nice.
But it turns out pretty nice, I think. And
I like it because it's not like the virtual background where you have a fuzzy head, you know? I like that it's real.
it is. It's real. And so, you know, when you talk about that, that's a great example of how do you use something even better. And that is what can you do if you're using a web conferencing tool like Zoom? How do you use that to promote your brand? And I'm a huge advocate of watching what's in the frame of the camera and saying, okay,
Right.
what's in the frame and how does that promote my message? One of the things that I've learned is that right back here, there's a gray block, right? Why don't I have a block with my logo on it, right? And so there's little things that you continue to work on to help deliver your brand, because in this particular case, everything in the frame promotes something, whether it's what you want or whether or not. And so how do you apply that in a way or use that tool in a way that promotes what you want to deliver? And you can cross that to all of your technology solutions, or even, you know, we're talking about technology here, but when what we really need to be looking at is new ways of achieving results that we need to improve our revenue, which is really what businesses are caring about right now more than anything else, right? And that could be a notebook. It could be you know, who knows what? It could be a rubber tub from Walmart.
Yeah.
If that fixes a problem for you, it's making sure that it works for you and that you don't work for it.
I love it. That's a great way to kind of wrap up. And we could say to our audience, you know, how can you use this exact episode to make it work for you? So what kinds of pieces did we share today? That's the whole point of doing these episodes, which has been so much fun. Not only have I learned a lot from every expert, but, you know, my aim is to share the guests' expertise with the audience so they can grab hold of things that resonated with them and apply them to their businesses, which you've done masterfully today. So thank you, Steve. We really, gosh, that time just flew by, but we're not done yet. Do you have any final thoughts before I throw some rapid fire questions your way?
I guess I would just like to encourage everybody to keep their chin up. I mean, you know, this is a tough time in in our environment, in our economy, and know you're not alone, right?
Yeah. Yep, exactly. You're not alone. We're in this together. We'll get through it. There will be an end, and we just got to keep on keeping on, right? So,
Yep.
okay. So my rapid fire, two rapid fire questions. My first one is about a book that you are currently reading. I want you to just think on what's on your bed night or your nightstand table or on your phone, whatever you're reading. What are you reading right now that's powerful? And can you share one tip or nugget from that with us?
Yeah, I'm reading Permission to Screw Up, reading Audible by Kristen Hadid. And this is something, it goes back to what I
Awesome.
was kind of talking
Permission
about.
to screw up.
Yeah, Permission to Screw Up by Kristen Hadid.
Love it.
And the nugget from that is really the title, right? I'm reading Permission to Screw Up by Kristen Hadid. And
Okay.
kind of the nugget from that is the title, right? It's giving yourself permission to make mistakes, even in times of crisis. We don't have the energy to obsess over mistakes. We just need to move on from them. And so far, it's been a really great book.
Love it. Permission to screw up. I'm going to put that on my list because I could use that permission. And then my second question is, do you have a mentor or a former teacher who really impacted your life in the past? And if yes, how?
Oh, wow. It's hard to point to one specific. I was working with Sage for a while, and I met a tremendous number of very good business people at those events. One thing, actually, two resources and two mentors. One was with the SBDC, and one was with SCORE. Both of those offer free resources
Okay.
for business owners. So a really good resource with a lot of good mentors to help. So and those were very good ways of gaining experience that I didn't have by association with business professionals. Yeah.
Wonderful. Great advice, Steve. Thank you. And how can people find you if they want to learn more about you, connect with you, work with you? Where can you send them?
Well, you can go to beyond50%.com, which is beyond50%.com, or email me at probably the easiest thing to do is go.beyond at b50p.com, b50p.com. You can spell out my whole name if you want, but they all go to the same inbox, so it doesn't matter. Yeah, just hit me up. I'm on LinkedIn pretty regularly as well, and if you look up my name's Stephen Krausse with a PH, you'll find me as long as you find Stephen Krausse at beyond50%.com, you'll get in touch with me, and I love to connect with people, so I'd look forward to touching base with anyone who would like to.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Steve. This has been super. I'm so glad to have had you on to share some tips on, how to kind of guide us through this disruptive time or any disruptive time, and to make sure we've got our ducks in a row with, cash and motivation and, trying new things and making sure that our value is always communicated as consistently as possible. That's a huge win and a big takeaway that I've had from today's talk today. Thank you. Thank you for coming. And until next time, we'll be signing off with another episode coming up next week for Getting to the Point. So take care. Thank you so much, Steve.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.